100 years ago, when Islam as an ideology exploded out of the Arabian Peninsula. दुनिया ने उससे पहले या उसके बाद ऐसी कोई तहजीब नहीं देखी थी जो हिजाज से निकलकर उस वक्त बैक वक्त दो मेजर सुपर पावर्स को कन्फ्रंट करती है, पर्शियन एंड द रोमन एम्पायर्स. At a time when they were burying their newly born daughters, at a time when their wars would last for generations and decades, at a time when the whole world was in absolute darkness, came a beacon of light. The civilization of Islam was created. Our great grandfathers, our elders, the earlier times, they created a most amazing, most magical civilization which humanity has never seen before. आप यकीन करेंगे इस बात को बच्चों कि आज से 1000 साल पहले जो साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी और सोशल जस्टिस और मोरालिटी और अखलाकियात और स्पिरिचुअलिटी उस सिविलाइजेशन ने, जिसकी बॉर्डर्स नहीं थे प्रैक्टिकली, फ्रॉम चाइना राइट अप टू अंडलुसिया, they were one country, one civilization, one ideology, governed under one doctrine we call Islam. For 800 years Muslim ruled Spain. The greatest of the greatest civilization was created there, to the time that all modern sciences that you hear today, that you read today in your universities and colleges today, originated from the times of our elders when that civilization was at its peak. Would you believe that we created gliders 1000 years ago? Algebra, mathematics, astronomy, physics, chemistry, medicine, everything that you read today has its foundation built into the civilization which was exploding in Baghdad, Damascus, Cordova, Andalusia, and Central Asia, Samarkand and Bukhara. The most greatest civilization humanity has ever seen. Islam was not spread through the sword. Again, a disinformation. Because when the Persian and the Roman Empire stood there for centuries at the most tyrannical, most cruel civilizations of the time, जब इस्लाम एक तहजीब के तौर पर जजीरा नुमा अरब से निकल उनसे टकराता है जाके, तो कोई कंपैरिजन नहीं है उस पॉलिटिकल, इकोनॉमिक और मिलिट्री पावर का कि जो इस्लाम एक मामूली से, practically absolutely nothing they had, and they confronted two major superpowers of the time. It was not on the basis of sword, it was on the basis of ideology. All those countries which converted to Islam during that time, 1400 years ago, are still Muslim today, right from eastern Turkestan right up to North Africa. Indonesia, Muslims ruled for 800 years. One of the greatest civilizations was created. Arbi, if you have an opportunity to visit Spain, Andalusia, visit Cordova, visit Karnataka, visit Alhambra. 1492. But before that, we'll come on to 13th century, almost 1258. Two calamities that fell on humanity. In 13th century, from Mongolia, Genghis Khan came out, and the golden hordes of Mongols, they crashed through the entire humanity, practically right down coming to India, on the other axis going up to Europe, but running right through, rampaging through the Muslim world, through Khorasan, through Central Asia, through Iran, to Iraq, coming down to Egypt. It was in Baghdad, in almost in 13th century, when Baghdad was ransacked by the Mongolian army. कहा जाता है तारीख में कि दजला ने, जो दरिया दजला है वहां पे, उसमें एक दिन में 2 मरतबा रंग बदले. पहले वो सुर्ख हो गया कि लाखों मुसलमान जब कत्ल करके दजला में डाले गए तो उनके खून से दरिया सुर्ख हुआ, लेकिन उसके बाद दजला स्याह हो गया, इसलिए कि जो लाखों किताबें जो लाइब्रेरीज में उस वक्त मौजूद थी, जब उनको दरिया में फेंका गया तो 600 साल की पूरी दुनिया के खजाने समुद्र में, दरिया में फेंक दिए गए. एंड ह्यूमैनिटी लॉस्ट अ सिविलाइजेशन, not just Muslims, the entire humanity. As the greatest of inventions, discoveries, map reading, cartography, medicine, engineering, robotics and astronomy were being done in Baghdad at that time. अभी हम इस चोट से संभले भी नहीं थे कि we lost Spain. In 1492, under the combined armies of Ferdinand and Isabella, Muslims were pushed out of Spain, the last frontier. And then millions of books which carried the history of humanity, which carried the civilization and science and technology, was practically taken to Europe, translated into European languages, And then, it was only then that their period of Renaissance, their period of Reformation, their period of industrial age, and the modern age began. Muslims, someone asked, perhaps it was Bernard Shaw, when someone asked Bernard Shaw that, अगर मुसलमान स्पेन से नहीं निकाले जाते तो क्या होता? He simply smiled and said, इंसान चांद पर 100 साल पहले पहुंच जाता. That is the civilization we lost. Our forefathers, our elders were the greatest of engineers. For 600 years, would you believe this? Today it seems mystical, unbelievable. For 600 years, the only textbook the world had in medicine, from China up to Europe, in all European universities, Cambridge and Oxford, for 600 years, the only textbook of medicine was written by Ibn Sina, his book Al-Qanun fi Tib, the law of medicine. If you read astronomy today, all the major galaxies and stars have Muslim names. If you read mathematics, algebra, the word itself comes from Jabr al-Muqabala. The word chemistry itself comes from Arabic word alchemia. Practically everything you read today has an Arabic origin. And let me surprise you even more. So many of you have visited California. The word California, where this has come from. California has originated from the term, word, Caliph Harunia, on the name of Khalifa Harun Rashid. This was the impact that our greatest of Baghdad civilization had on the medieval world, on the earlier times, and in the modern world as well. After 1492, the banner to represent the ideology, represent the ethos, the honor and dignity of this civilization, the mantle was taken by the Turks, the great Ottoman Turks. And the Turks represented the ethos, they represented our honor. The institution of Khilafat stayed on. First the Caliphs were Arabs, but after the Abbasis, Turks took the responsibility and represented, united the Muslim world. But Turks were primarily a martial race. They were honorable, dignified people, not very interested in scientific developments, not very interested in research, but more of honorable horsemen, soldiers, fighters, dignified architects. One of the most fascinating architecture. Visit Turkey, you find it there. Even the Shah Faisal Masjid that is built in Islamabad is Turkish architecture. But it was the 20th century when the darkest period of the Muslim history came. Indeed, the darkest. Can you even begin to imagine how it must have felt to lose India? For 1,000 years, Muslims ruled India and created a civilization which was tolerant, which was benevolent within. Created a civilization in which no Hindu, no Jew, no Sikh, no Christian was converted on the basis of sword, despite the fact that Muslims ruled India for 1,000 years. Could have been done, never done. Muslims ruled Spain for 800 years. Not a single Christian or Jew was converted on the basis of force or sword. But when Muslims were thrown out, what happened? In 1492, when Muslims were pushed out of Andalusia, for next 400 years, there was no azan in Andalusia. There was no namaz in Andalusia. There was no masjid in Andalusia. In early 1930s, when Allama Iqbal visited the Jamia Masjid of Cordoba, he writes a fascinating emotional poem about it as well. And you often see pictures of Allama Iqbal praying in Masjid Qartaba. That was the first namaz in Spain after 450 years. There's a reason why Iqbal cried when he visited Andalusia. There is a reason why Iqbal wrote poetry. One of the most fascinating poetry Iqbal wrote was on the lost heritage. 1857, we lost India. And that was the decline. Because in 1924, we lost Khilafat Usmaniya as well. Ask your great-grandfathers. हमारे बुजुर्गों ने खिलाफत मूवमेंट चलाई, तहरीक चलाई थी खिलाफत को बचाने के लिए, because that was the center of gravity of our honor, of our dignity. We were never so humiliated in our history as we were in 1924, when crusading armies overran the entire Muslim world practically, except for Makkah and Medina and a bit of Afghanistan. The entire Muslim world was physically colonized. We lost India, we lost Muslim world. From one Khilafah, they created out 57 Muslim countries.